Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for the wave. How are you all? Hi. I am your session host, Morgan, but I'm really here to introduce you to my friend over here, Sam. He has a session today on, and my iPhone is doing all weird things, A New Hope, providing Apple devices to all students on campus. Again, Sam Tarr. Really excited to hear his presentation today, and I will pass the mic to you.
Thanks so much. Everyone hear me good? Okay. So if you haven't had a chance, just go ahead and scan that QR code. We're going to fill out a few polls throughout the whole session. And obviously it's kind of far away, but you should be able to get the URL right on the top to do that. So I will just wait one more second for everyone to get that and fill that out. But we're going to do a few polls throughout the whole thing just to kind of try and keep everyone excited, engaged, because some of this stuff is not as exciting as it could be, right? So it looks like quite a few of you were actually up all night because they're so excited for the presentation. Oh, no, maybe not. I'm guessing that may be more because we're in Nashville and you were up all night with that. But we'll go with the excitement for the presentation. I'm happy to see that nobody has a bad case of the Mondays, though, because it's Wednesday. So that would be really, really bad. Oh, someone does have a bad case of the Mondays now. I've already had 2 cups of Irish coffee, and I'm ready to go. Hey, whatever gets you excited for it. Maybe share a cup with me, though, so we can make it a little more interesting for those people that are up all night. And finally, we have a few people in the wrong room. Well, I do admire your honesty. Please stay, and maybe you'll hear something interesting. I'm going to guess that probably a few of those people that have had the Irish coffee are also in the wrong room, too. So anyway, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. My name's Sam Tarr. I'm going to be talking about the Bowdoin's groundbreaking digital excellence commitment that provides every current student and all future students with a suite of the latest Apple technology and course-specific software, which is designed to advance learning, inspire innovation, teaching, and create digital equity. I'm going to talk about this saga from the initial conception right through the implementation, where things stand now, and what things look like for the future, as well as the lessons we learned. So first, just a little bit about myself. As I said, my name's Sam Tarr. I'm a senior desktop systems engineer at Bowdoin College, where I manage all 6,000 of our devices. That includes Macs, Apple TVs, unfortunately Windows devices as well, all those systems that support them. I deal with printing, OS updates, application patches, software deployments, configs, license managers, all that fun stuff. So I've been managing Macs really all my professional career, which is almost about 20 years now. Now, before we get too far into the presentation, I do like to throw this disclaimer up here. I did not have time to paint it or build it to scale, so please excuse the crudity. Now, considering we're in Music City, I really should have probably tailored this presentation a little more towards the music theme, but I didn't think that far ahead when I was submitting. So I don't want to totally ignore Music City, though, so I'm going to work from some references in here and there. I'm hoping that you guys all do leave here with a lot of good, valuable information, but if you don't, at least tonight, after the party, when you're laying in the hotel bed, you'll have the Star Wars Cantina band stuck in your head. All right, so the Digital Excellence Commitment began a relatively long time ago in a campus somewhat far away. It's an emotional journey that transcends both time and space. So 3 years ago, we announced our Digital Excellence Commitment. With this, we're going to provide every Bowdoin student a MacBook Pro, an iPad, and an Apple Pencil. When they graduate, we unenroll all the devices, and it's theirs to keep. When they first show up on campus, we distribute the technology to them in our field house. The first year of our program, we did all 4 class years, and then subsequent years, we do just first years. Now, the reason we wanted to do all classes initially was we didn't want to wait that 4 years for the program to really start taking off, and then we would have had to manage a couple different things. Do you have a laptop? Do you have to use the lab computers? Things like that. So we went all in. Now, I can still remember the day that we officially announced it. We'd worked hard for several years to get our program approval, and there was a lot of excitement around the announcement, but we were sitting there thinking about it. Suddenly a lot of fear started creeping in. What if this program isn't successful? Do we make the right decision? Is it going to be ready in time? So it's got to be ready in time, though. Now, we didn't hire Dolly, but we did work more than 9 to 5 some of these days to implement it. So now that the program's been announced, we need to figure out how things are going to work, all the details, how we're going to do this, how we're going to distribute and manage the devices to the students. Well, we're going to focus on 3 things. We're going to focus on automation, ease of use, and security. So first step, using Jamf Pro and zero-touch deployment was necessary for all our small staff to set up 3,000 student devices in only 3 days. So how does that work? First, when the computers are purchased, they get added to Apple School Manager, which then syncs down to Jamf Pro. Then I use the Jamf Pro API to move all those student devices into a specific pre-stage, and that pre-stage then determines what configuration profiles, applications, things like that will get installed automatically for them. After that, we have the students go through the setup process themselves. We do require they install a couple pieces of software, but for the most part, they're able to choose any applications they want through self-service. Now, because we still own the devices until they graduate, we don't have to worry about any licensing issues or anything like that. So anything that Bowdoin is licensed for, the students are able to install on their devices. All these devices are secured with single sign-on for authentication during enrollment. So this helps in case the device is stolen. Once the Macs are set up, we use the Jamf app catalog to keep all the applications up to date, and then a combination of MDM commands and nudge to make sure they're running the latest version of macOS. We're no longer binding most of our Macs to Active Directory. Instead, we're using a combination of local accounts and platform single sign-on. With Platform SSO, when someone logs into the Mac, it's with their SSO username and password. So that password's kept in sync using Okta-Verify app, so they don't have to remember multiple passwords. So we have another quick poll. Just curious what everyone else is out there using for authentication for their user accounts. So I'll wait just a minute, give you guys a minute to fill that out. All right. So I'm sure that'll still change a little bit. So it looks like we have a combination of everything. We switched to local accounts about 4 years ago, which local accounts work pretty well, but they're more designed for consumer opposed to enterprise. So we're making the transition to Platform SSO slowly. Again, binding with Active Directory, we do that ourselves a little bit for some of the shared machines we have in classrooms. But the last couple of years, it seems like there's been a couple of small bugs, so we're really trying to get away from that. Looks like a lot of you are using Jamf Connect. I mean, that makes sense. We're at JNUC, right? So you obviously would be using that. We had looked at Jamf Connect a couple years ago, but it didn't work on our wireless network, so that's why we didn't end up going that route. And then Platform SSO, that's really where we're headed. I'm excited about all the features with that's coming. None of the above. Curious, what's none of the above? Anybody? Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to episode 5. We're working through the details of streamlining our program, and a Windows client starts to strike back. We're getting a lot of feedback. You're leaving us out. Why did you choose Apple? Why not Windows? Why can't you let our students choose their own platform? So you might say they had a little bit of envy in there. Now I don't have to tell you guys why we chose Apple, but here's a few of the points that we had to use to convince them. We chose Apple for several reasons. It's the platform that 95% of our students were coming with anyway. So it's what they're used to, it's what they're happy with, that's what they like. Most of our lab computers, they were already Apple computers anyway, so that makes the transition pretty easy. I'd say 80% of our faculty, they were using Mac anyway versus the 20% Windows. And with Mac OS, I can easily streamline that out of the box. And it's a little harder for me to virtualize Mac OS than Windows. So we can do it. It's not as cost effective. Now, I know we are at JNUC, but I do want to spend just a couple minutes talking about our Windows setup. I know probably some of you are lucky enough that you don't have to deal with Windows in your organization, but we do as well. So we did get a little initial pushback with virtual desktops in the cloud, but after several iterations, we've been very successful using Azure Virtual Desktops. So over time, they've really made a great replacement for our physical lab computers. We're currently using this shared desktop model, which means we can have a pool of desktops that everyone can log into, which ultimately allowed us to cut costs while increasing performance. So to make this work, we use something called FSLogix, which stores the user profile on a file share and automatically loads when the user connects to the virtual machine in the pool. Think of it like Microsoft's old roaming profiles, but it actually works, so that's nice. The cost savings here allowed us to give the desktops a lot more resources than we were able to before. But we did quickly discover that even though we built them to Microsoft's Power user recommendations, they're still underpowered. Our academic apps, some of them, they need a lot of power. Shared desktop pool worked really great when we had one user logged in, but as soon as the second user tried to log into that same machine, they'd fight for resources. So our next step was limiting the desktops to only one user at a time. We're trying to figure out how to offset the cost of more desktops and by changing the schedule when they're on, because that's primarily where we're getting charged. But as a lot of you know, probably students work at unpredictable times, so this was almost impossible. But luckily about that time, Microsoft introduced what they call scaling plan, which will bring machines up and down based on need. So as more users logged in, it'll fire up the machines for us. As they log out, it'll turn them off. So this turned out to be a pretty good lifesaver for us, and we were able to triple our available desktops. So in the end, scaling plan saved us even more than we thought we would. So we were able to change the hardware under the virtual desktops to one that had a GPU. So this was key in matching performance for our physical, to match the physical desktops for applications especially like ArcGIS Pro and things like that. So I do have a quick video. It's time to see how this process works for the client. So they just open the remote desktop app, and they're going to put in their email address. And what that's going to do is it's going to associate with our Bowdoin desktop. So it's going to redirect them in a minute to our single sign-on logon. And they have to go through this authentication process the first time to prove it's them and associate with the desktop. Now, once we go through that process, in just a second, you'll see all the desktops that are available to me. I'll choose one of them to connect. Now, once again, I'm going to have to put the username and password on there, but this is to actually log into the virtual machine. So as we do that, it's going to start the login process. It's going to be loading FSLogix, so it's going to grab my user profile in the background from the file share, slide it right in, so then I have access to my data. So with this solution, our students are able to use Windows from their Mac. They can actually use it they can really use it from any device that has a network connection, because they don't have to use the remote desktop app. They can also use a web browser if they really wanted to. So this solution, we've appeased our Windows users, and things are back on track. So now we can move on to the actual distribution of the devices. So after months and months of planning, the time, it's arrived. So over 3 days, we distributed and set up MacBook Pros for all of our students, and then iPads for all our first years. Now, our upper classes had already received iPads a couple years prior, which I'll touch on that in a few minutes. Now, we had moved several times and unboxed all our devices, set up additional network access points, and had students schedule an hour time block to come pick up their devices. Unfortunately, day one did not go nearly as smoothly as we hoped. At one point, we're like, is this fully operational or what? We were a little embarrassed, with some of our issues that we had, but reflecting on it, we could only plan so much. Sometimes you just have to get down, you have to do it and learn from some experience. So how bad was it? Well, at one point we had about 500 students show up at the same time, even though we had capped the 1-hour time blocks to 100 people. So the network was very, very slow because it was not designed for that. All our staff were in short supply trying to help the students because they weren't following the directions we left. Instead, they're just raising their hand, am I done yet? And they started to set up iCloud syncing and installing large apps like Adobe and Office, and so that made things even slower. But nonetheless, we did charge ahead. And the second day of distribution, we made a couple changes, and things did go smoother. We added some additional network capacity. We were very more insistent that the students actually follow the directions. If we saw someone installing iCloud, don't you dare set up iCloud right now. Wait until you get back to your room. It's going to be much faster, and everyone's going to be happy. But ultimately, the day did go better, and here's a picture from it. So you see the students are pretty happy. They're getting their technology. Everyone got all their tech. It was up and running, and by the first day of classes. So it ultimately ended up okay. So we've completed our first trilogy from announcement to implementation, but that's not the end of our saga. To really understand the whole story, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to a longer time ago in a campus that's, well, still the same distance away because we didn't move. In 2016, my supervisor and I started talking about providing laptops to all our students. At the time we had probably 600-700 lab computers, and most of them were just sitting there idle like 80% of the time. It's a huge waste of time, energy, money, all that. And then we started getting a lot more requests for laptops and carts. And while laptops were, much more mobile, as far as a lab goes, that kind of is where it stopped for us. Because they're locked up most of the time. They're only pulled out for what that class is going to use them. And so they're used even less. They cost more, all that. We can't manage them. We couldn't manage them remotely unless we went over and woke them up or things. So that kind of defeated the purpose. So that's where we came up with the idea of providing laptops for the students seemed like a great path forward. They would get their own device. It would be on quite a bit because they'd be using it. It'd be win-win. So we started thinking about it, can we really pull this off? Is it actually going to be a viable solution? So we anxiously started workshopping the idea around to others, and it was not a hit at first. We heard things like, this idea is too old, the future's cloud computing. You're going to need a bigger budget, you're going to need a bigger budget, and we don't have money for something like that. So we started small. And around that time, Bowdoin received a donation to its Thrive program. And our Thrive program is designed to help low-income, first-generation students who are coming to college. Now, most of them were either coming with a very, very old device or maybe no device at all. So they were already at a disadvantage from day one. While we had plenty of lab computers they could use, they couldn't get their work done from their room or wherever they're comfortable on campus. And if they went home for breaks, they had nothing to use. So we thought, what way can we in IT help them thrive? And that was by giving them technology and teaching them how to use it. So in summer 2018, we distributed our first set of laptops to 22 Thrive students. And I can remember the students first walking in, and they saw that they were MacBook Pros. And one of them said, I can't believe they're Apple laptops. We never thought we would get Apple laptops. We thought we'd get like some crappy HPs or something. Hopefully no one works for HP out there, but this is JNUC, so what do you expect, right? But during that first handout, it was a genuinely exciting moment that we all felt. I do have this short video that I'll play that gives you a glimpse into the excitement.
I want to open it, like I'm scared. I feel like as you open it, you gotta
So like I said, I mean, you can see the excitement on their faces. They've all got their phones out. They're taking pictures. It was just a really fun time. So the next year, we grew our program. We added 83 new Thrive students. So we're on the right track at this point. You know, we're gaining some traction. We're slowly growing our program. You know, soon we have the number of lab computers we've already got. You keep adding to these Thrive computers, and which are increasing every year, and it'll be a little bit easier of a sell as you know, to provide them for all. But then comes 2020 and COVID, and we're all sad for many reasons. Instead of growing our program, our laptop program, we switched sides to providing iPads. Now, our iPad initiative did end up being a pretty good pilot program for our digital excellence commitment that would launch formally 2 years later. And during our iPad initiative, we shipped 2,000 iPads to all our students in all 50 states and 35 countries around the world, right from a reseller directly to their homes. Now, to achieve this, we had to migrate our Jamf instance at the time to the cloud and use zero-touch deployment for them to set it up. So when they unboxed they got their iPads in the mail, they unboxed them, they turned them on, they were required to enroll in MDM at device startup. They put in their Bowdoin single sign-on credentials to authenticate to the server, then they went through the enrollment process and they were off and running. So it worked really well. Cellular service was activated on as-needed basis using Jamf and a wireless carrier. We also had record on who had what device, where it was located, and it really provided a way for us to, you know, give students a secured device at home that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do unless we shipped them to the campus, unboxed them all, set them all up, shipped them off, and we didn't have nearly enough staff to do something like that. So why did we switch to iPads instead of MacBook Pros? Well, at the time, we switched because, well, two reasons: cost and internet access. Cost is an easy one, right? iPads are cheaper than MacBook Pros. Internet access, we had a couple hundred students that didn't have, you know, good quality internet access, whether that was for economic reasons or geographic, or, you know, maybe they were just at home sharing internet with all their other family members that were trying to attend school and work and things. And so iPads with cellular were a lot better option than trying to do hotspots and things like that. Now, iPads weren't without their own issues, right? For one, we couldn't ship into China, so we had to purchase the iPads on the Chinese online Apple store using Safari Translate and have them shipped to the local Apple store for them to pick up. That alone made us a little bit crazy, for sure. Also, something happened with the AppleCare at the time, and it wasn't tied with a pencil to the iPad correctly, so we had to sort that out. So repairs were a little bit tricky for a while, depending on who we talked to. But, you know, we kept moving forward. Not all our hope is lost, because there's another one. MacBook Pros come back into the picture. Spring 2022, our digital excellence commitment is formally born. So we've completed our prequel trilogy from idea to announcement, right? An original from announcement to implementation, but that's still not the end of our saga. You probably want to know how things are going now. Thankfully, we don't have to wait another 30 years, though, for that next installment, because it's now a shorter time ago than before in a campus that's still the same distance away. It's been a year since the battle of our first deployment. Most things have been streamlined. We had some time to reflect on the initial round. Our 2023 distribution went quite a bit smoother. We only had first years, so that made it a little bit easier in itself. And at this point, everyone's pretty happy. When coming into the field house, our students tap their ID cards on an iPad kiosk, which brings up their information. We're then able to scan all their serial numbers on all their boxes and assign the different devices to them, hand them their technology, and then they can go sit down at the tables and set them up. So I will show that process in just a minute, but we'll do a quick intermission check-in to make sure everyone's still awake. All right, so probably most of you have had a chance to do it. So we have a few of you, this is heavy dog. It is a lot of information, although it might be your eyes that are heavy because you've stayed up all night in Nashville, right? This is the presentation I'm looking for, good. So a lot of you are enjoying it so far, that's good, 50%. PowerPoint, why did it have to be PowerPoint? Well, it's actually Keynote, so we don't have to worry about that. I'm just here to get out of doing the TPS reports. It's probably you, whoever's having a bad case of the Wednesdays, pick that one. And you've got a bad feeling about this. It's probably because you're in the wrong room. So all positive feedback, I guess, so we will continue. So I'm going to show you the setup. Here's a setup of what the students do. So it's a very similar process to what you'd see when you pull their Mac out of a box. First thing, they need to enroll in device management. Now that quick window you saw there, we have an agreement that they need to accept, which basically says they will, not do terrible things with the device. They go through their single sign-on authentication, so we know it's someone from Bowdoin setting this device up. And now the enrollment process has started. So we're installing the Jamf binary, we're installing a few config profiles that we require, things like that. As that finishes up, we get into local account. So they're going to create a local account password that they only really have to remember for like 2 minutes. You will notice that my username is pre-filled in, so that's nice because it can pull that from the authentication. At this point, we start getting a lot of the pop-up notifications of the different applications that are installing, PaperCut for printing, OneDrive for data backup, things like that. Those pop-ups will come up, let them know it's going to install. They can either click OK or they can wait 30 seconds for it to time out. And then it will start the installation process of whatever app that is. Once that finishes, it will pop up another one telling them it's been completed. And then once it's completed, it might give them any directions of something they need to do. So that continues on to the login window. And then you'll notice up in the top right, we have a little registration required thing. So that's what we're going to do to set up Platform SSO on this device. So they need to enter that local account password that they just created. Now, believe it or not, we do have students that forget that in the 2 minutes that they've done. A little annoying, it's a pop under, and so it's like right perfectly in line with that. So we have to slide that out of the way. But once we authenticate here, it will verify our identity. And then the last step is going to be putting that password in. That's the Okta password, which is going to sync down to our local account. So we're going to, now we don't care what that local account password is because now we can log in with our Okta password. And so if something happens, we can reset it and they'd be off and running. Now the last step is they're going to just open up self-service and then they can pick any pieces of software that they want to install for class or personal use or whatever. Now the application install notifications you just saw, no, it's not Swift Dialog, it is actually Jamf Helper, which works pretty well for us. We originally looked at the Jamf's macOS onboarding, but we didn't decide to go with that because I couldn't differentiate student devices versus faculty staff devices, and they are set up very differently. So as we go into year 2, faculty and students are really starting to buy in. However, we do still have some last holdouts, right? We continue to have some faculty. They're showing a little bit of disgust when we're removing some of the lab computers. So I ask them, why do you want to keep them? And they say, well, we're still using the computers and we want to have them for a backup when if something happens to the student device. So I had to convince them using key client data that the labs were not actually being used. So once I showed them the data, average usage on a lot of these, once we got the program full and running, was like a couple of hours each month. So it was hardly worth keeping them around. And as for keeping them around for a backup device, we don't need to, we don't need them because if a student device is going to break, we're going to fix it. Well, I'm not going to fix it, but Apple's going to fix it because we have all our devices have 4-year Apple Care, which covers the cost of repair for any damage, whether it's accidental or not. We back up desktop and documents folder using OneDrive, and pictures and music and bookmarks, passwords, all that stuff can be done in iCloud. So when a student has a hardware problem, we give them a loaner. They go through the same quick setup process I just showed you a minute ago. They're going to log into OneDrive, all their data is going to come down, they're going to open up self-service, install any applications they need, and then they'll be off and running pretty quickly. So each year we're moving more and more of our computer labs. I think we're down to about 100 lab computers now from the 600-700 that we initially had. And the next step is we're planning on removing our classroom computers as well. So many of our student holdouts the first year because they wanted to use the device they already had, not the one we were providing them. As new classes are coming on, that problem goes away because they already know they're getting a device before they come to campus, and so they haven't already purchased one. The only real holdout we have is students saying, I don't want you to control my computer. I don't want you to see what I'm doing. Well, we can't see what they're doing. In fact, their account that they create is the only account on the machine. So we try to make it as private and personal to them, as we can. Now we do control a few things, right? We require File Vault for security reasons. We require Defender for security reasons. We're installing OneDrive to prevent data loss and aid in the transition from one computer to another. And we install Okta Verify to set up single sign-on and a second factor. But the number one complaint we still get is, I don't want you to make me do updates as often. And unfortunately, we don't subscribe to it's an older version, but it still checks out. We enforce all macOS updates. They need to be installed within 2 weeks of release, and then all our application updates are done usually release day or the day after using the Jamf app catalog. So eventually, walking the line, we were able to convince almost everyone. It's been a long journey to arrive at where we are today, but the program, it's really starting to show all the benefits. Our last distribution went really, really well. I think we only had one enrollment failure and one student that didn't set it up, which we corrected in a couple of days. Back in September when we did this, I was talking with our CIO, and I told him, I was like, I'm glad this went really, really well, because I was planning on saying it went well in my presentation, and I already had to submit this a couple of weeks ago. So, overall, we have a lot of happy students, and we've pretty much accomplished what we set out to do. We have tech equality. Every student has access to the same hardware and software tools. Our lab usage continues to go down, and we continue to pull them out instead of replacing them. Computers aren't being wasted. We're using less energy. And every classroom or space on campus can now be used as a computer lab. Our students can work from anywhere they want, right? They can work from the beach. They can work from the tropics, a nice ski resort, or even a family vacation. So what could go wrong, right? There it goes. For security, we're using File Vault, so we don't have to worry about them having to say the magic word when their passwords are forgotten. We have a self-service form behind authentication, so they can use that to get their own File Vault pass keys if they need to. And now that we're rolling out Okta Verify with Platform SSO, we could change their password in Okta, and that would sync down as well. File Vault, Defender, and OneDrive help with DNA, data loss or leaks. And using Find My means that X actually can mark the spot for us. So that completes our saga. So now, just curious, does anyone have any plans to provide devices to their students? All right, so looks like some of you would like to, but you don't see it happening. I mean, honestly, that's where we were 7, 8 years ago. I did not think it was going to take off. So if you can start small or you can start someplace, you might be able to, work up to it. Looks like some don't have plans. I mean, it's definitely not for everybody. Which schools are already providing devices? Just curious. So quite a few of you. I should say it almost completes our saga, right? Even though we have so many benefits, we've received buy-in for pretty much everyone. You always have those that want to spin off and go rogue, right? Some people, they're going to be dissatisfied. And if they want to go solo, we really can't force them to use the technology. Maybe they're just being nostalgic. Maybe they won't use a laptop. Maybe they want to use Windows. They think the virtual desktops are no good. Whatever the reason, some people, they just don't want to change, and you might have to leave them frozen in carbonite. So what do we learn from this, right? Well, it's not going to be perfect the first time. Our first distribution, first day, borderline disaster, right? Our second distribution, it was an improvement, but it still wasn't quite there. But eventually, we're getting to something similar to this. And while it's been an incredible success for us, we had a lot of bumps along the way with distribution, Windows users, worried about what we're controlling or privacy, and then faculty and staff buy-in. But we continue to move forward and tweak things for our users, because when users are involved, well, life always finds a way. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So you're creating a local admin account, looks like the original setup. So when a user reboots, they're having to remember two separate passwords, one for firewall and then entering the platform SSO.
So the question is, we're creating a local account, and then when they reboot, do they have to remember two passwords? No, so it's one password. So they have to create that local account password. Okta doesn't have just-in-time user creation yet, so it means the local account has to exist on the machine already. So once you create that local account, you can then set up Platform SSO with Okta. It syncs that password down, so it's going to change the local account password as well as the file vault password. So that original password they set completely goes away, and now they just have to know their new password. Yeah?
Your devices are intended for students to keep once they're done with school, and if so, do they need to return them if they're expelled or if a leave of absence? What mechanism?
Yes, so the question was, it's intended for the students to keep the devices, and what happens if they leave for another reason? So that's a really good question. So yes, when they graduate, they do get to keep their device. If they leave for any other reason, they do not get to keep their device. So if they transfer or they get kicked out or something, they need to return that device. And so we work with the registrar's office, and as students leave for other reasons like that, they let us know. We reach out to them, and they need to return the device. If they don't return the device, we'll lock it through Jamf, and then ultimately we can bill them for it. It hasn't come to that, but it could for sure. Yeah, right here.
Our university, we ran a similar program, and we distributed iPads, FlightPads to kids. I was curious because you said during the pandemic you guys mailed out devices. Our process, more or less, we need them on the network in order to enroll them, just based on how our SSO is set up. What was the process like? What was the process like doing that with the students, like home themselves with no tech support? Like how was that whole process?
Yeah, so I think the question is how did we have the students set up the devices not on campus without tech support? So obviously they could call us if they had a problem. Because our Jamf instance was in the cloud and SSO is the authentication is open, they can do that through the internet. Basically all they needed was an internet connection to do that. So, and when they turn the device on, it sees that it's, through School Manager and Jamf that it needs to enroll in MDM, so they have no choice but to do that. So it's basically just walking through the steps. And if they had a problem, they could call us for sure. We were available, but most of them didn't have any issues.
Had it pre-configured to run that way prior to sending them out to the students?
Yeah, so we put them all in a specific pre-stage, so they would have to get whatever those settings were. So as we purchased them through a reseller. They then sent us all those serial numbers of what those devices were, so we knew, okay, this is what the students are going to get, and set them up, so they would be forced to set them up that way, basically. Yeah.
Follow-up question regarding the gentleman's question about when a student leaves
Mm-hmm.
and graduate.
Yep.
Have you thought about, as far as the process of unenrolling the device?
Yep. So again, we work with the registrar's office to get the official list of graduates, and then we use iPass, which basically looks for their name, grabs the serial number associated with their name in our inventory, and then basically adds all those serial numbers to a smart group, a static group, excuse me. And so we know all the devices that are, considered graduated at that point. We then have a script that runs on that smart group that basically removes any Bowdoin owned software, or at least, a lot of the software is free, or maybe it's a subscription based like Office or whatever, so we don't take that away because their license will go away. But anything that we need to take away, some of those academic apps, we'll remove that, and then the last step in that is unenrolling their device from Jamf. And then once that's done, we then go into School Manager and release all the devices. Sure. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good question. So how are we funding the program is the question. Several years ago, it was part of our capital campaign, basically. So it was raised through donations. They raised enough money to put it in the endowment. So with all that interest or returns that you're getting on that block of money in the endowment, it's enough to fund the program. So we didn't change tuition or anything like that. But yeah, we are obviously getting savings by pulling out lab computers and things like that, for sure. Any other questions?
Are you using silicone, sending out silicone devices as the new ones, sending those out the newer devices that develop, or you got like retro and because we have an overstock like older devices, but with like newer students, wherever we get the latest technology, where we had an overstock due to budget restrictions, we had to buy so many at one time in order to make sure we had enough devices for campus. Did you guys experience any similar issues?
Yeah, so the question is, how are we distributing older devices? They're all newer devices. How are we able to know sort of how many we need? So each year we'll purchase, we find out how many students have been accepted, and we'll purchase that many devices for them. So they're all MacBook Pros. I think this year they were the 14-inch MacBook Pros. Previous years they were the 13, but that's been discontinued. So we'll find out how many students are going to be. We'll buy usually an extra, 20. I don't know exactly how many. We'll buy a few extras, so in case we have some transfers that come in or things like that, but also so that we have ones for loaners. So as they, inevitably break their machine and we send it off, we swap them in with the same device, the same vintage device, and then when theirs comes back, we swap it back. So we do have a few extras in that we, as transfer students come in, but basically the idea is that as they start out in the first year, it'll be a brand new device. The Apple Care will then carry them through the 4 years, but maybe someone transfers in their sophomore or junior year, we have a couple of spares, and so we would pull one of those vintage laptops so it would match the class year. All right. Thanks everyone for coming.